freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
Hello, everybody. This is Cheryl Todd from Gun Freedom Radio, and I am excited today to talk to two of my awesome friends at the same time. I have Patrick James. He is the president, creator, and founder of Cold Dead Hands, CDH Incorporated. He's an author, he's a gun enthusiast, an avid outdoorsman, and he just spends as much time outside as he possibly can. So I appreciate you being inside today for this. Patrick, welcome to the show.
I'm usually captive. Thank you so much for having us on, and I'm usually captive to indoors. I really have to fight to be outdoors, unfortunately.
I totally get that. And sitting next to him is Jon Britton. Many of you know Jon as AKA Double Tap, and he is the co-founder and COO of Cold Dead Hands. He is an avid student of human nature, American history, and philosophy. Welcome to the show, Jon.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having us.
I was excited when I realized that there was a actual person behind all the really smart, really history-based posts that I was seeing on AKA Double Tap. And then one day, I don't know how it came about, but I was like, oh my gosh, this is Jon Britton. Okay, you actually looked stuff up, and it just kind of it's so well done. And I want you guys to talk to me about Cold Dead Hands and how that came about. But the posts that I was seeing were so well thought out and so well organized. I don't know, somehow I felt like there was a team of people behind them. And so I really appreciate that, because you always cause me to stop and think, and I love that.
Well, the reason for that also has a lot to do with how Cold Dead Hands came to be. We built the Facebook page first. Basically, we did everything backwards from the way they say you're supposed to do things. We built the Facebook page, and largely how we built it was interacting with our followers. A lot of pages will post stuff up, and people will comment on it, and that's kind of the end of it. You don't get a whole lot of interaction. And, Patrick started from the very beginning building it on the interaction.
I built it solely from a Facebook page. One guy, one room, working 12 hours a day as a chef, coming home, responding to the customer, to the people who followed what we wrote, and then I find this guy the same way you found this guy, reading something that he wrote and said, hey man, you want to join in? And it's gone from there. I mean, it was legitimately not even a business idea, but just a suggestion from my friends. In fact, when they suggested, hey man, I really like what you're writing about gun rights and personal rights and responsibilities, why don't you start a Facebook page? I literally was like, I don't know what a page is. I had an account, and I'm like, I've got a page. That's what I'm doing here. And lo and behold, Cold Dead Hands, of course, was, the avid gun guys go-to every time we thought about Charlton Heston and what the resolve would be to take our guns from our hands, and it just grew.
And that well thought out portion comes from a lot of hours debating people in the comments.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another thing that we do differently than a lot of pages. We very rarely ban people unless they just get completely out of hand.
Mm-hmm.
And, actually debating them not only strengthens our positions, but it gives people who read the comments both sides of the argument, so they can actually decide for themselves who makes the better argument.
Yeah, we're kind of the referees.
I love that.
As long as you can keep your comments civil,
Yes.
you can continue commenting.
Yeah.
The only thing we do ban is the repeated drive-by leftists, who just repeat the same thing over and over and over. Eventually, beating up on them isn't fun anymore, or doesn't build threads.
Although we do also have a lot of anti-gun liberal top fan followers. So.
Absolutely.
Well, because I think that people really do have a hunger for true conversation. Like, well, here's what I'm thinking, and I'm open to now also hearing what you're thinking. There's a huge portion of people out there that all they want to do is talk at you, right? Mm-hmm. So those drive-bys, they just want to talk at you. They're never going to receive or even give you the honor of taking time to consider what you're saying. But let's constantly, serve the people who really are open to constructive conversation. And I applaud you both for doing that. And that was one of the things that I thought was an interesting kind of juxtaposition in my mind, because I'm thinking, the name of your brand and your website is kind of this aggressive, cold, dead hands, right? And then yet your conversation, the threads that I see happening on social media are, very conversational and very open to, get the give and the take and the back and the forth. And so I think that also kind of made me like lean in a little bit more, like, okay, when's the shoe coming down? When's that hammer coming down? I know it's coming down because the name of their thing is Cold Dead Hands, but I think possibly, and you can tell me, maybe that's just more of a position of, look, I'm not willing to compromise on my rights, but I can have a conversation with somebody.
That's absolutely right.
Somebody that disagrees.
Yeah, the name very much is a statement of resolve.
It is. And it's for all our rights. It's not, and when we talk rights, we're talking our natural creator bestowed unalienable rights that our founders talked about and created the Bill of Rights for us for. That's a government protection. Mm-hmm. Our resolve is, you can't have my free will, my free association. You can't have my right to self-defense, my life. You can't have my pursuit of happiness. You can't have those liberties. And our resolve is, you can't have them. And our Second Amendment is the emphasis upon that makes us different, because we can protect those rights. And our resolve is how far we're willing to go with that. And we don't, and we never have, and I don't mean to interrupt, John. We often do this with each other, but the reality is, we do not endorse insurrection or a type of physical violent revolution, and we never have.
We actually spend a lot of time talking people off that ledge. So
that doesn't end well for anyone. It doesn't end well for the government. It doesn't end well for the people.
Right.
But when it comes to protecting your rights, you have your life, you have your liberty, you have your property, your pursuit of happiness, but you don't truly have anything unless you can protect and defend it.
You have the resolve.
Somebody can come and take your life, they can come and take your liberty, they can come and take your property, unless you're able to protect and defend it. That's where the Second Amendment comes in, and the saying is, as old as I am, the second protects the first, and everything else in there. So
absolutely.
That's what we teach. Training is our key. We teach training.
Now,
we're not instructors ourselves. We both could be instructors if we wanted to. It's a time management thing for us, so we endorse other instructors. Mm-hmm. But I teach people, or I when I talk to people, when I write, it is about train. When you think you've trained enough, train some more, because you haven't. It really is about the training.
And you're talking about like training with an actual firearm out on the range?
I'm talking about training from everywhere, from your brain, which is the very most important training aspect. Situational awareness, that really becomes the major. I mean, if we're sending, I didn't have to, she chose. My 30-year-old stepdaughter decided she wanted to live in Austin instead of here in the rural country, and I was not happy with that. So I taught her a lot about situational awareness.
And for those who don't know, Austin is the San Francisco of Texas.
It is. Now, she loves it. She loves the atmosphere, and that's great. But I wouldn't send her down there not prepared with.
Yes.
And of course I trust her because she is a very strong 30-year-old woman. So she is, you know, she's not, you're not going to pull the wool over her eyes.
Yeah.
But I've told her all the time, if you're walking across, you know, if you're leaving a bar, or you're leaving a club, or you're leaving someplace, and it's dark on one side and light on the other, cross that street, get to the light and walk in the light, don't walk in the dark.
But yeah, training is a broad spectrum. I
Absolutely.
mean, it's mental training, it's physical training, it's hand-to-hand, self-defense, as well as firearms training.
Yeah, our firearm is the last and ultimate resort.
And we tell people all the time, because invariably anti-gun people will say, well, what about this situation? And what about that situation? A gun is not a magic talisman.
Nope.
It doesn't ward off evil. It just gives you a fighting chance when you do have to face evil.
Well, and it is just, it's another tool in the toolbox.
Exactly.
You know, we sell defensive pens. This is just another tool in the toolbox I go nowhere with. I'm a writer. I'm a businessman. I don't go anywhere without a pen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to carry a pen that I can use in a situation. I don't know. I often carried big pens or cheap pens, but I switched over to a pen that could be a dual use pen and a DNA collector if I need it to be.
Mm-hmm. For sure that. All right. So Cold Dead Hands, what I have written here, you tell me if I've written it right. It is a website. It's a brand, but it's also a website where people can actually go, and it's designed to educate, to motivate, and to advocate for citizens' Second Amendment rights and liberty from the bottom up rather than the top down.
Right.
And that's
part of the problem that we've seen with advocacy in general is people are willing to write a check, but not willing to go to a Senate hearing, or not willing to go to a town hall meeting, or not willing to
School board meeting.
or just not willing to open carry versus concealed carry. And, you know, there's so many things that the people can do themselves that is way more effective than anything any lobbyist can do.
Mm-hmm.
But it takes time, effort, and energy. It takes education, and it takes motivation to get out there and be your own advocate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we try to provide.
It does in the limited type that our government wants us to approach it in.
Mm-hmm.
We see this when we go and testify, say in Austin on a state issue in Texas. If there's 400 or 500 people and everybody has 2 minutes, they're a little bit burdened at having to give everybody their 2 minutes to speak. If there was 500,000 standing at the front door of the Capitol wanting their 2 minutes to speak, it'd be a little different. If there were 2 million standing at the state Capitol wanting their 2 minutes, it would be significantly different.
Mm-hmm.
And what that does is it allows us the opportunity en masse to learn what we need to do and facilitate those changes en masse.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take as much time as the individual would take normally. It also gets us away from the government regulations that 501c4 corporations actually have. There are a lot of regulations. One of the reasons I went with a for-profit style company is because unapologetically the government, I will say what I want
Mm-hmm.
against a government, and you can't tell me exactly what I can and can't say. I talked to my lawyers about 501c3, 501c4, and all of my lawyers sitting down at a table said, man, you'd have to be very careful with what you say.
Mm. Right.
Going to be on your butt every time you open your mouth and say you can't vote for that politician, you can't vote for that bill, you can't do these things. I'm not going to be constrained in that manner. I'll pay my taxes as a for-profit corporation, and I will say what is right and just for the people.
Well, I love that. And also, I think that it's important that you do say what you think you should say, because the messaging is like this never-ending tidal wave of nonsense and garbage that just gets metronomed, right? Just
Absolutely.
over and over and over again, repeated, and you can switch stations and, oh, there's that exact same phrase again. Switch stations. Oh, there's that exact same phrase again. And so when people want to stand up for their rights, or they feel like, well, in my bones, I agree with shall not be infringed, period, end of story, walk away. The Second Amendment is the Second Amendment, and we're done. In my bones, I feel that. But I don't know how to push back with words on this tidal wave of nonsense, because we're being told, well, it's common sense. And clearly you don't have common sense if you don't agree with me that we can infringe on our rights, or it's for the children. Don't you understand, right? And we're saying,
you do that voice well, because that's the average voice that's used.
Well, we hear it, right?
Yes, absolutely. You do that well.
And so for us and for you guys to be able to say, yeah, I agree with you. It is for the children, right? Where somebody says, I just want to feel safer. Well, me too. And part of feeling safer is standing up for my rights, training myself with lethal and non-lethal force, right? Yep. So yeah, we agree on this part. Now, the road you take and the road I take are different. And so to be able to empower people with not only some words, some verbiage, but also your example to say, I'm not a stark raving crazy man, right? Or woman. I've got this.
As far as you know.
As far as you know, right? And if I am, you should probably also be ready, trained, and armed just in case, because you don't know who you're going to run into. Like the same reason we wear our seat belts is we don't know if we're going to get in an accident.
That's right.
Right?
You know, accidents.
We've been trying to get constitutional carry passed here in Texas. You know, believe it or not, Texas does not have constitutional carry, unless you're a criminal. Criminals constitutional carry every day.
There you go.
Because by law, criminals do not obey laws. Only the law-abiding do.
Oh, and they carry in gun-free zones too.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Well, that's one of the things I wanted to kind of dig into and kind of, hash around a little bit. In the last couple of weeks, we've had examples of mass murder. Okay, so even saying mass murder, that's a subjective term. We call it a mass murder because the FBI said, well, if 4 or more people are murdered in the same incident, then we call it technically mass murder, unless you're in Chicago. Then nobody calls it anything, right?
Yeah,
so,
it should be quantified.
Oh, yeah, they call it Saturday.
They call it Saturday. You're right. The weekend.
Right.
So we had the guy in Gilroy who he bought his gun legally, but then he did a bunch of illegal things with it. The guy in El Paso, Texas, he bought his gun legally and then did a bunch of illegal things with it. Then we had Ohio, bought it legally, did a bunch of illegal things. Then we could barely catch our breath, and then there's this situation in Philadelphia where this guy couldn't have bought his gun legally because he had lost his rights. He was a felon, right? So, but he still had the gun. So he had it illegally and did a bunch of illegal things with it. So as long as we were over on this side of the news cycle, people are yelling and screaming, we need more, whatever. I don't know.
Gotta stop the violence.
Right.
Right. And then we're over here and it's like, oh, well, I don't know what to say, but we probably need more laws. Right? And so I'm saying we had people who purchased legally. We had somebody who purchased or stole illegally.
Right.
The same remedy is being suggested, just more laws. And I'm thinking, wouldn't this right there tell any logical person that, let's say all of those guys broke 20 laws. Is there a 21st law that is suddenly...
In the minds, yeah, there will be in the government. When we ask the government to keep us safe, there'll be more than 21 laws. There'll be more than 20,000 laws. There'll be more than 200,000 laws. Because the majority of the people are saying we want to be safe. You need to protect us. And the reality is, it is our responsibility to create our safety, our safe space, our safe zones. It's our responsibility.
One of my favorite lines is, the most dangerous phrase in the American language is, there ought to be a law. Because,
right.
You go back to the founders, they
Simplicity.
The Constitution is not very long.
It's simple.
It's very simple, to the point. It enumerates exactly what the federal powers are. It enumerates what rights are protected against federal infringement. The whole 9 yards. A simple document. Keep it simple, stupid. But you get into the point. Guns are a prime example. People don't want to accept responsibility, and they're more than willing to defer that responsibility to the government in exchange for some of their liberty, And in order to do that, they can't look at the black and white of rights and responsibilities. They have to find that gray area. You got to keep the guns out of the hands of criminals.
They exploit the gray area.
You got to protect the children. I have to feel safe. None of those are a right or a responsibility. You either accept your rights and the responsibilities that go with them, or you relinquish your rights and the responsibilities that go with them. That's the only option there is.
Our founders told us all of this. They did, but it seems as though over the years, people have been given different definitions or different explanations as to what they created. And a lot of that was through that insertion of progressivism. When you look, and I'll talk about Wilson. Wilson came in, and what he said to the people was, do not read the preamble to the Declaration of Independence. If you read
to the Constitution.
No, to the Declaration of Independence. He did not want, he said, think of us as a collective people. Do not think of yourself as individuals. Think as a collective. And strip off the preamble that talks about our natural, inherent, unalienable rights.
Mm-hmm.
About everybody working together for that. And that was the insertion of that progressivist socialized style movement. And through that insertion, you would get one administration after another that was like, no, but they didn't actually tear down the laws and statutes of each previous administration. So they layered that on top of each other, and what you got is a muddied down version of what our founders intended. And that's what we have today. It's muddied down. They don't want to repeal past laws. They want to leave them on the books and pass new ones to layer on top of them, because it's more expensive to repeal than it is to just say, all right, we're gonna write another law over top of this one.
We're gonna just keep piling it on, and then let the regulators sort it out.
Yeah. So you come on down the road 80, 90, 100 years, and suddenly you do something wrong. Maybe it's a fractional misdemeanor style wrong, and somebody at the prosecutor's office says, yes, but 80 years ago, this was a felony. We're going to charge you. And you're like, oh, wait a second. Seriously?
I mean, how many times have you seen those websites about crazy laws that are quote unquote still on the books?
Blue laws. Oh, let's face it. I mean, there are so many laws that are still on the books that people don't even realize that they're just minuscule, but if they were brought up and charged with them, they wouldn't be as minuscule.
Right. So
they're still there.
What's that?
I said they're still there, and that's the whole point.
Right. And so people like you and I, we are law-abiding citizens. So we educate ourselves as much as we can. Right? I mean, maybe not.
Are you a law-abiding citizen?
Are they trying to change the definition of what law-abiding actually means? I think so. Through intrinsic laws and very restrictive laws, they can simply say, well, none of you are law-abiding any longer because you don't. We don't. We speed. We do this. We do that. We don't.
And not only that,
all the laws.
How many people, even Supreme Court justices, actually know all the laws that are on the books? If you don't know and understand every law on the books, then you cannot be law-abiding, because you have no clue whether you're law-abiding or not.
Certainly.
That's
But ignorance of the law is no excuse, yet the law is so convoluted and so voluminous that you can't be anything but ignorant of the law.
Well, and the people that are huge fans of piling laws on top of laws generally tend to not be huge fans of Christianity, but of course, right now in my mind, I'm like, all have fallen short in the sight of God, right? So it's like, we know we're sinners, we get that, but as far as man's law, we're doing our best to traverse the laws. We're trying to not step on any of those landmines and break any laws.
We don't want to be infringers.
Right.
Infringers of personal rights.
Right. And so the bad guys that they keep trying, they tell us that's the reason for the laws, is the bad guys. They're just going to keep barreling through life like a bull in a china shop. And then if they do happen to end up with handcuffs on them, well, now the government's got this big stick that they can beat them with 6 ways to Sunday, and they still get out with no bail in Chicago, right away and back on the streets to do more bad.
Banging the next day.
It's like the old saying, it's only illegal if you get caught.
Right, exactly. But that's not the way that we behave, right? And so when we say that, these new background checks or these red flag guns, all these new laws that we just have to have, they are only going to negatively impact people who are trying to be law-abiding citizens. That's, I think, what we're trying to say. And it's starting to sound like a cliche, like that. It's not, the gun that kills a person, it's a person that kills a person. That has been said so many times. It's no less true than it was the first time it was said, but it just starts ringing hollow in people's minds. And, the other side, they just slap some new emotional phrase out there and everybody's like, oh, yeah, I feel it,
And that's the double-edged sword of cliches. It didn't become a cliche unless it has some truth to bear the repeating as often as it needed to be to become a cliche. Mm-hmm. But yet once it becomes a cliche, it's all of a sudden that truth is dismissed as cliche.
Well, it's like the good guy with a gun cliche.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to tell people this, listen, the reality is the only thing that can defeat evil is a good person who is present, willing, and able to stand up against it with equal or greater force.
Mm-hmm.
That is it. Now, it could be paid professionals. I was first responder, firefighter, EMT. That's what I did. I worked with law enforcement on a regular basis. I trained with law enforcement in their SWAT tactical teams. The reality is, whether I'm paid to be there or whether I'm not paid to be there, if I am present and I am willing and able, I can stand in defense of innocence.
Mm-hmm.
That is what a good guy with a gun means. And it is no less important, no more cliched. It is a reality that people have to understand. They may not be present at a mass shooting, or they may not be willing to stand up. It might be a tactical reason. It may be they want to. I mean, all types of people carry. They may want to. There's a lot of guys out there that when I was professional would call Ricky rescues all the time. They want to be a hero. They want to be in the news. They want to save lives. And there's value in that. The guy's got heart.
Yes.
Doesn't mean he's going to respond.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean he's going to act. It doesn't mean. I have been many times in a burning building with my second man on the hose, turned around, and my guy was gone. And I'm there in a burning house by myself.
Oh, wow.
It is what it is. Some people are destined to do things, and they don't. That's just who they are. They're servants. They are there to defend. Some people want to be. Some people are actually born into it when they are in the furnace. They are forged at that moment, and they realize this is what I'm born to do. Good guys, good women, good people that are present at the moment, and they are willing and able, are the only thing that will stand up to it and defend it.
Absolutely. And so that kind of takes us to the next thing I wanted to talk about. Jon, you had written kind of a 5-point or however many points you had there. response to some smarmy comment somebody made about, well, after Philadelphia, when it took like 50 police officers to finally take down this one bad guy with the gun, I guess we can completely dismiss that good guy with a gun theory. And, you know, I thought that I was kind of in that place where I said earlier, I know that's not right, but I need to sit and think about it a while to try to put words around why that smarmy phrase is completely wrong. And you did a great job of debunking it. Can you guys dive into that for me?
Well, like I put in that post, you know, the way people react, civilians versus, or an armed citizen, because police officers are civilians too, by the way, but an armed citizen versus a police officer. A police officer in a mass shooting situation, for example, they have a measured approach. You know, they have to go in not knowing who's who.
Mm-hmm.
They have to separate the victims from the perpetrators. Mm-hmm. They have to evacuate the people who are, you know, what get them out of harm's way. But they're still, you know, their goal is to get to the person doing the shooting.
Mm-hmm.
So they're already split between trying to identify, trying to protect, evacuate, locate, and eliminate the target. Mm-hmm. So I mean, they're scattered 6 different directions already.
Mm-hmm.
An armed citizen in a situation when it pops off like that, they know who the bad guy is. Mm-hmm. He's the one walking through the Walmart door spraying bullets out of an AK.
Yes.
You know, he's got one decision: fight or flight. If he's able to fight, then he's got another decision: kill or be killed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. I mean, the reaction, the response of an armed citizen in a situation like that is very survival oriented, very immediate, and very lethal. The
Mm-hmm.
police, on the other hand, like I said, they're trying to save lives. And in the end, they're trying to bring the guy in alive. You know, if they just went in like, well, Dayton, Ohio is a prime example. The guy that did the shooting in Dayton, there were police right there when he started shooting. They responded within seconds,
mm-hmm.
the same way an armed citizen would.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they didn't have to separate the perpetrator from the victims. They saw the guy with a gun, they returned fire, mm-hmm. which is exactly what a citizen would do if they were armed and, like Patrick said, present, willing, and able.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, trying to compare a measured police response that's taken into account, you know, innocent lives, property, containment, identification, the whole 9 yards, to what an armed citizen in the moment can do is 2 completely different things. But in that same, you know, one guy versus 50 police officers, there's another layer to that where people say that, you know, there's no reason why anybody should have an AR-15. You know, what's an AR-15 going to do against the government? Well, one guy with an AR-15 just held 50 cops at bay.
Well, yeah.
Now, part of that is it's not all the gun. Part of that is their measured response.
Right.
And part of that is him being barricaded, and part of that is him ambushing the officers after they had already come in and served their warrant and already had 2 or 3 people in custody, as I understand.
Yes.
We saw that comment frequently.
So, you know, it was an ambush, and it's a combination of things, but still you have the one guy with a assault rifle holding off 50 police, yet, you know, what's your assault rifle going to do against the government? Those two don't jive any more than it does comparing a civilian response to a police response in a mass shooting.
The reality of that scenario, and I like to use that is, one, the people have already tagged ARs as bad. They tagged them as the equivalent of military. They're not. They never have been. They're semi-automatic, just like any other hunting rifle out there. Is the platform better than some? Sure. Is it worse than others? Sure. We can say that. Why do we need them? Do we need them to defend against a government? You know, is that a possibility? Is that a realistic understanding? Sure. but it's not a military weapon. And a lot of people say, well, you would never stand a chance. You're just a person against the government.
Mm-hmm.
What we're talking about when we talk about the government, this is what I like to illustrate to people. You are talking about we the people that swore an oath to our Constitution, right? That's the military. That's the government you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
That's the military and the police.
Do you understand that these men are we the people?
Mm-hmm.
So when you're talking about you don't stand a chance against the government, you're talking about we don't stand a chance against politicians, or we don't stand a chance against our military, because the military is 95% we the people. So if you thought you were going to do something against the innocent people of our country, 95% of the military is going to say, yeah, no, that ain't going to happen. And, oh, do you realize that this military base we're on, 95% of us are saying to you 5%, it's not likely you're going to make us use this equipment. And since you can't use it yourself because there's only 5% of you, we're going to put you in the brig, and 95% of us are going to take this 100% of the equipment and stand up for we the people.
Boy,
that's really the reality of it.
From your lips to God's ears. And I can only hope, because when people are putting out there on social media and stuff about, oh, it's time for the next civil war and sign me up, I'm like, we are so soft. We are so lazy. I mean, don't say stuff unless you mean it, right?
Oh, we've been in a cold civil war for at least 50 years now.
Sure, yes.
Like I said in the beginning, a violent, physical revolution, nobody wins in that.
Right.
Nobody.
Right.
And that's what we teach. That's what we preach. Nobody wins in that.
I agree.
We are in a revolution, but it's by the pen, by the voice.
Yes, and I definitely don't disagree with that. And I think that part of that soft and that lazy comes from a lack of truly understanding what our founding fathers faced, the odds they were up against, that they didn't have anybody to call for help, or get their government check to be sure they had a meal at the end of the month. None of that. They had to say individually, me, myself, I am willing to go to the mats.
Yeah.
To, sacrifice, the ultimate sacrifice, and my family's, because if I am found out a traitor, guess what? They're not going to just stop at me.
I mean, it's complicated in all things, right? I mean, there's complications to how do we prevent violence. There's complications on how do we become more responsible? How do we become more self-reliant? And at the end of the day, personal responsibility takes time, effort. It's a time, effort thing. And most of us are busy.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I work 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, minimum. Most people are like, no, you don't. Listen, and the reality of it, when you build something around social media, you're actually working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, because my phone is my access port. So wherever I'm at, I'm working.
Yes.
And the reality is, do I have time to do a 4-day 1,000-round training course every other month? No. And not to mention how expensive that can be. So now we have to balance that all out. And that's, I think, where most people are like, oh, I try to be as responsible as I can be, but I've got 4 kids at home. Mama's hungry. I'm running over here. I need to stop at the gym, but guess what? The gym's going to have to wait because I forgot something at Walmart, and I need to get home because the kids are crying.
Yeah.
That's the reality of most everyday life.
That's
go to work, I come home, I try to take care of everything here. The car's breaking down. I got to take it in to get an oil change because it's 3,000 miles overdue. And I need to go shoot my weapon because I haven't had time.
And that's not even getting into town hall meetings, school board meetings,
Exactly.
Senate hearings, writing letters, making phone calls, And one of the things that I wanted to get in earlier when we were talking about how effective the people can be at advocacy, think of any issue in recent history where the switchboards in Washington, D.C. got shut down by people calling in.
Mm.
You know, it doesn't happen often, but
Mhm.
when it does, whatever that issue is, it's solved.
Mhm.
It's done. It's either passed or it's dead on the water. You know, when they start shutting down switchboards and overloading email servers, that's when they're listened to. Even when you can't even get through to speak, you're being heard.
Right.
So
Caused problems.
it's not always being there physically. Sometimes it is an email. Sometimes it is a phone call. Sometimes it requires standing on the steps of the Capitol, you know.
Well, I have to share this story with you because of some of the speeches that I've made and that sort of thing. The Trump for Victory campaign had reached out and wanted me to help organize, you know, some speaker events and that sort of thing. And there was some movement on that. Like, I was like, that's exciting. That's a good idea. I know a bunch of people. Let's get it together. And then the murders happened, and President Trump said some things that were like, sorry, what? Like, you're proud of the bump stocks decision? You're proud of the suppressor decision? You said, let's take the guns, and then, and this was before.
Due process later, yeah.
Yeah, and so the people that I wanted to have come speak were like, I will not have a career on the other side of this if I right now stand up and say, hey, this is the guy to vote for. We understand that, you know, the Democrats that are up there on the stump right now, there's no way we can vote for any of them if our lane is the Second Amendment, but we can't with a straight face say, yeah, but this guy's solid, right? Until he has a, you know, usually he'll say something and then later he'll come back and go, he doesn't say, yeah, I misspoke, but he, you know, he cleans it up. So I told them right now is probably not the best time. And they said, I get that. Let's give it a beat and we'll come back and visit it. And I said, but here's something you need to really understand. The people that you want to show up and vote, we aren't the ones that get 10 neighbors and a sign and a silly pink hat on our head and go march down the road. We don't do that. We still communicate, but we communicate in other ways, like what I'm telling you right now, that people are backing off. They might just stay home. The things that are said on social media, I don't know how many of us are actually writing letters that we should, but I said, we just have a different communication style, but you need to listen, right? If you're waiting for us.
The biggest problem is, and you go all the way back to the first coining of the phrase, the silent majority. The squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Yeah.
The silent majority gets the shaft.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yes.
Well,
except maybe at the ballot box. That's the only place where the silent majority has any power. But once you elect somebody, it's the squeaky wheels that steer them around once they're in office.
Well, and one of the things, are we Trumpsters? I am not a Trumpster. I would never profess to be a Trumpster. But I'm not a politician guy.
Mm-hmm.
So I will say that every politician says something wrong and says something right. So because of that, I will tell you what he says wrong, and I will tell you what he says right and what he does right.
Yes.
What we look at today is, I'll look back on my social media history. That's something that we do on a regular basis. We look at analytics. We look at all of those things. The week of Trump's election 2016, our page had 156 million views.
Wow.
In 1 week, the week of the election. 156 million, more than the voting population that voted Trump into office. We were effective in helping to let we the people decide who was going to be the president. Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump. Who
Right.
did they decide? They decided that Hillary was not going to be president.
Right.
Would they have chosen somebody other than Donald Trump if they had been viable? Likely. But Donald Trump got the nod.
Yes, he did.
And I like Donald Trump because Donald Trump, if everybody out there thinks that Donald Trump crafts every one of his tweets. They're crazy. This is a CEO, multi-billionaire. This man, what he does is calculated. Everything is calculated. Mm-hmm. And that's what he's doing right now, is he is calculating. He has been attacked by the media and the leftist agenda for the entire time he's been in office. He has got to create a smoke and mirrors so he can actually do something. Yeah. So if it's a few words over here in a tweet and you guys have lost your mind over these few words in a tweet, so be it. You are really not valuable people if this over here has got you tweaked. Sticks and stones might hurt your bones, but these words, they're never going to hurt you.
I'll give you a prime example. When the red flag laws first came up, that's when he made the comment, take the guns first, due process later. Now, you listen, nothing ever went anywhere of that, but now the conversation of red flag laws, what's the one thing they put front and center every time they bring up red flag laws?
Yeah.
Due process.
Mental health and due process. Yep. So the leftists, mental health, we got to do something with mental health, and the rights are saying, whoa, wait about the due process. Can't do that.
But then Trump puts out a tweet going after, what was it, Chris Costa?
No.
Yeah.
Oh, Cuomo.
Cuomo.
Yeah, saying he should be red flag. That tweet was the perfect illustration of everything that is wrong with the red flag law.
Exactly. And some people are saying, well, he did that on purpose. And I'm like, I don't know if he did it on purpose or not, but it helped me to craft a message for my listeners and my followers to be able to say, see, this is how it can be misused right there.
Now, some people will write that off as, Trump's just all over the map. Some people will write it off as Trump's playing three-dimensional chess, But regardless if you look at his record, with the exception of the bump stock ban and the silencer issue, you still got the same guns you had before he was elected. They're not banned. They're no further restricted than they were. He's pushed for things like, nationwide concealed carry. We would prefer national constitutional carry, but it's a start,
Well, what I would prefer is recognition of our Second Amendment right, national. That's what I would prefer, not a federal constitutional carry reciprocity garbage. What I would like is I, as a law-abiding citizen, have a right to protect myself anywhere.
Keep it simple, stupid.
Keep it simple, stupid.
And that's the thing, when people are like, yeah, but states' rights, you can't have national reciprocity because of state rights. It's like, yeah, but the rights of the individual far outweigh all of that, which, by the way, those rights came from God.
Well, first off, we talk about states' rights.
Right.
The states do have rights. But when they entered into a more perfect union, we had a Bill of Rights that they had to agree upon to protect the individuals. So these are uninfringible by government persecution of any type.
Not to mention the fact that almost every state has an arms provision in its own state constitution, with the exception of 5.
They have to recognize our rights. It doesn't matter now if they want to say, if you drive, which isn't a right, driving a car is not a right, we can walk where we want to go. We can use a horse where we want to take it. If you're driving a vehicle and you're licensed, you're under state regulations. If they want to say you're going to drive 55, that's okay. That's all right for that state to do that. But if they want to say you got to jump through a bunch of hoops to have that gun that is actually guaranteed to you by the Constitution, they don't have a right actually to control that. It's not really in their rights.
Amen and amen. All right. Well, I've kept you guys longer than I had planned to, but I do want to talk about both of your books. So somehow when you're doing all that stuff you said, and the oil needs changed, and you got to stop back by Walmart, all that stuff, you both found time to write books, separate books. Who do we have here? This is Jon's Gun Sense, Past, Present, and Future. Tell us a little bit about that.
That actually started out as a collection of articles I had written for the Cold Dead Hands page. And I started sensing a theme in a lot of the articles that I was writing. So I put it all together into a book. I call it a book, but it's more of a pamphlet. It's 30-ish pages.
Mm-hmm.
And I modeled it after Common Sense, Thomas Paine, Common Sense.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, using the word gun sense was a play on the demanding moms, who want hashtag gun sense. So
moms demand action.
And
basically, some unnamed, we don't know what action, they're just demanding it.
They're demanding
it. I still say that sounds like a 70s porn, but
it does.
Anyway.
Kind of a bad choice.
But I will now.
But that's what that was. It's a look at the past, what the founders' intent was, what we've gone through with gun control, and what it's looking like in the future. And the future, of course, depends on where we go today in regulation and laws or the repeal thereof. So
yeah, we're for repealing laws anyway.
It's like I always say,
of 34, we wouldn't need a suppressor hearing protection act if they repealed in effect.
Right. But when people say, do you need this, AR-15, AK-47? No, in my daily life, I don't need it, but I can see in my children or my grandchildren's future where they might actually have a need for it. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to be the one that denies them that need just out of my own convenience or discomfort today.
Right.
So, again, it's the Bill of Rights, not the Bill of Needs. So.
Absolutely. And one thing that's interesting is, the whole background check, they want universal background checks now, and they weren't even a thing until the 90s.
Right.
And so when did all the craziness start? Was it before we had background checks or after?
So
are they really working?
Yeah.
What's that?
Well, and this is another thing, everybody's talking about mental health. Oh, that's a big buzzword. Mental health. We don't want to have mentally unstable people having firearms. The reality is the mental health that we're talking about has been studied from so many different angles that even the professionals who are dictating what is literally, you have mental health issues, you don't. They can't decide if Freud was right or Jung was right.
Mm-hmm.
Total opposites of the spectrum.
Because they're theories. See, we're smart enough to know that it's a theory. So
and what happens with theories is they continue to evolve. Yes. If we allow the government to start writing laws based on mental health, those theories will evolve and become even more restrictive.
Yes.
And before you know it, more people will be tagged mentally ill because it's easy to continue to evolve a theory.
You talk about background checks being a thing, weren't even a thing until the 90s. Well, you know what else came about that time? You got the 24-hour news cycle, you got the internet, and not long after that, the birth of social media.
Yeah.
And all of these, the 15 minutes of fame mentality.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right.
The YouTube famous, all of these things play into the thought processes of somebody who wants to go out in a blaze of glory and be famous or infamous, whether they go out that way or they get arrested.
Mm-hmm.
There's a notoriety that comes with it, and it's not movies, it's not video games. I remember when Dungeons and Dragons was turning all of our children into Satan worship. Okay.
I wouldn't let my little brothers play that because I was thinking the same thing back then.
Right. I mean, kids.
I figured it out now. It's okay. I'm not still cuckoo bird that way.
Music, books. I say, well, everybody's like, we got to ban all these things, and I'm like, do you realize that they said that about books
Fahrenheit 451
years ago? As they evolved it, music's been said, you name it.
Everybody wants to place blame. Nobody wants to take responsibility.
That's the truth.
And that's what it all boils down to in the end.
Exactly.
They want to blame government for not controlling guns.
Mm-hmm.
They want to blame the mental health system for not taking care of mentally ill people. They want to blame video games and movies. And everybody's got a finger to point, but every time they point that finger, they got 3 more pointing right back at them.
The way society gears up right now and all the responsibilities that people already have day to day to actually supporting their families and actually living life, it doesn't take many straws from the time you leave home to the time you get back to your home. It doesn't take many straws to make you break down. It just doesn't. I mean, the movie Falling Down with Michael Douglas is a prime example. It's a prime example of what that looks like. Today, when I walk into a gun shop I can buy, by the time I get back home, I might not have been able to pass that mental health background check. It's just the reality of it. It's unfortunate to say those things, but it is the reality. And so what does stop that is a person willing, present at that moment, willing and able. And now, it may not be a gun, right?
Right.
It may only be, I'm going to talk you off the ledge today, brother.
Yes.
That's it. I might
Absolutely.
not have to shoot you.
Right.
As long as you're not shooting other people, I don't have to shoot you. Let's talk about it.
An
Why
active.
are you up there?
And even if it does involve a gun, most defensive gun uses don't involve the gun being fired.
No.
Merely having it or brandishing it is usually enough to diffuse whatever situation's going on.
Well, I was a first responder. I mean, I was an EMT, so I learned to talk. Everybody needs to learn how to talk and have some empathy towards what everybody's going through. It's not easy. It's not easy to have empathy. But the fact of the matter is, whatever's happening here is real to them.
It's true. An act of uncommon kindness it can go a long way. There was a commercial playing on TV. I think it was from the Pass It On folks or something that, I think it showed both ways. Something bad happened and then it just spiraled and got worse and worse. And then it's like, but then somebody decided, well, they were going to do something good. And then it just floated through the air. And then everybody, when the next person they encountered, they acted kindly towards them. And it's like, man, what a different world we would live in if that were the case. And in day-to-day, people to people, I feel like that's possible, and I see it happen. Then you get on Twitter and it's like, what kind of nasty third level of hell is this? Why?
And that's the problem. We're all connected like this, but we have far fewer connections like this.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, and the fact of the matter is, another, one of those beat up cliches is, if you want peace, prepare for war. That's a cliche now. But the reality is, it is, like John said, a cliche becomes a cliche because it's repeated, not because it's false, but because it's true.
Yeah.
You want to have a good vacation, you need to plan your vacation and plan the things you need to take for your vacation. And if you have children or grandchildren or whatever, if you don't take the right things for their enjoyment, your enjoyment isn't going to be possible. So if we plan for peace, in that moment, that peace isn't going to happen. We are prepared to defend our peace.
It's easier to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war.
Yeah, no doubt. And then I just want to wrap up talking about Patrick's book, A Frail, and so perfect, the segue, A Frail New World, Digital Conspiracy. Tell us.
Yeah, it's a fictional thriller government conspiracy book. Right before I started all this, which in turn I haven't had a chance to write the sequel to that book and have been asked many times to write it. It basically takes the digital age and the brainwashing initiatives of the 50s by the CIA,
the MK Ultras,
and it basically takes an implant that is, you are able now to track people. You are, the way that my book describes it is, you are able to use it for video and audio. You can talk like a cell phone. So now they're putting it in military. So military has action plan right now, real time. So they're behind enemy lines. They know everything. You close your eyes, you get the maps. You hear them talking. You know exactly what to do, where to go, and how to get out. They move it through that to the people, and then they found a way to actually brainwash people into doing things with that implant. And you have the thesis, antithesis, of course. The government conspiracy and all the bad guys. There you have the good guys who stop that plan.
And of course, it takes place during the transition from analog to digital.
Yep. So the whole premise is when they shut down this analog signal and they put this digital signal in, right here's where they put the software in that controls this device.
Wow. That sounds really, really interesting and just maybe a little bit too true. I don't know. A little scary.
I've had a lot of people read it. I've sold a lot of copies of it. I haven't actually promoted it very much. But the reality is it's a good story overall. It presents a kind of I am definitely a Christ-centric constitutionalist, so I follow the anti-federalist side, which I believe were more Christ follower, versus the federalist side that was more church going and more religious in their nature.
Organized religious.
Organized religious, yes. And the reality is it presents three different people on the hero side of that story that have varying degrees of their Christian faith. And then it presents a couple of bad guys over here that has been extorted or beaten down by people. And so it kind of presents a lot of different, and I don't go into massive vivid detail, but I create a pretty good scenario around each, very descriptive in how the scenarios play out. So
very cool.
Something that back burner fun stuff for me. I've got a couple that are in the works as far as nonfiction, as Jon did, but again, with what we do, it just takes a lot of time to structure it all out, find the time.
No, I definitely hear you there. Everybody talks about finding the money tree. I want to find the time tree. Like,
yeah.
Give me some more time.
Well, I'll take the money tree too, but.
Well, yeah. I mean, if I have to choose, I don't know, but.
I want time. Time is the thing I can't buy more of. I can have plenty of money, but I still can't buy more time.
Amen. Well, guys.
Not that I have it, but I want
What's
more
that?
time. Not that I have the money to buy the time.
None of us do, right? But speaking of time, thank you so much. You spent a lot of time here with me today, and I appreciate your time. It is your most valuable and finite resource. So
we also like hearing ourselves talk, so.
That's very fair, right? So, all right. Well, thank you guys so much. Again, Patrick James, president, creator, and founder of Cold Dead Hands. Jon Britton, the co-founder and COO of Cold Dead Hands. You can follow them at colddeadhands.com.
.us.
colddeadhands.us. Buy that handle on Facebook and Instagram. By their own names on both of those platforms. It looks like they both avoid Twitter. I wonder why, because it is the...
I've tried. Oh, God, have I tried.
It's a time-consuming endeavor.
So thank you again so much, and stick around because there's always lots more coming up on Gun Freedom Radio.